Here we go.
I see it's
Do core activation.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
Good. You ready
hey,
for it?
Eric.
Yeah. If you guys want to pop up into the workshop, Brennan's there. I think Gary is in as well for learning how the regs work. So we're going to get started with that. I've got a sample up, so we can kind of walk through some stuff. It's that it's the same module that Rick sent out to everybody earlier in the week or last week. So see you up there.
Okay. Be there.
Okay.
All right, they should be joining us here in just half a second. All right, let's see here. And is it Gary or Perry?
Perry.
What's that?
Perry with a P.
Perry with a P, okay. I was trying to remember. Because there was somebody else, Gary, who had commented and stuff like that the last time. So I wanted to make sure I had it correct. So... Well, good. And Brennan, how is life treating you?
Good. Few weeks still left in ski season.
Are you going on holiday this summer anywhere?
I might go to Mount Hood in Oregon, where they have a freestyle ski camp through all summer, basically.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm actually going to be up there Memorial Day weekend. It's my brother's birthday. He's up in Portland, so we're going to be out on one of the rivers. The yacht club that he's with, he's got a powerboat, and so they've got like a event or something like that. So we'll be tootling around.
It's lovely up there in the gorges and up on the volcanoes. It's really something.
Yeah, when we were up visiting him a few years back, we took a tour up to Mount Hood, up to where the ski resort is and everything else. And we were there in, I don't know, probably July or August, and they still had snow. So
yeah, the snowfield up there lasts depending on the heat, but can last into August.
Yeah. So it was, and the drive up there's sort of a valley that kind of comes up from the east. So we kind of drove out along the river, and then we turned in and headed up this valley up to the sort of the backside of Mount Hood, and just lovely farmland and everything else, kind of along the way. So looking forward to heading up there for that. But that's about it. And then after that, it's summer camps. So that'll keep me
Do you do those
occupied.
sort of for a week at a time or whatever?
Yeah, I've got a couple of archery ones that are just a week at a time, and then the ones that I do with the high school program. It's a 3-week session, and they have 2 3-week sessions, but I'm only doing the first week. That way I can make it to ConSim. And that's going to run from like mid-June through the first week of July. And that's the one where I'm teaching fencing camps, and then I have the history of the Napoleonic War camp, and now this new one, history of the Second World War. And this is where the kids are learning history, and then we're also playing war games. So I'm looking forward to that. It's usually a fair amount of chaos, but the kids have really enjoyed it. So far, my wife is always surprised that anyone signs up for the class at all.
Yeah. Those sound like great enrichment programs. I mean, like for a European history AP type of program. That would...
Yeah, well, this is mostly middle schoolers that are coming to this summer camp program, kind of before they go on into high school. And so, yeah, but it's a lot of fun. And so both of the classes are full at this point. So I'm glad. That means I'll get paid. So Robert knows all about that, don't you, Robert?
Oh yeah.
Indeed.
Oh,
Well, hey, we're going to get started with our Regs 30 workshop. And if you've kind of signed in here to where we're at with Moskwa, I'm down here by the Bagration Fletches. And I just moved a bunch of stuff forward just so we'd have some things to play with and not have to spend a lot of time marching around. Of course, if you guys want to do some other examples, feel free to grab some units and throw them around, and we can kind of mess around with stuff. But since we had done a premiere workshop a couple weeks ago, and then we did a 5th edition workshop 2 weeks ago, I thought with this one, what we'd be doing is kind of comparing and contrasting this with 5th edition. Because there's more things that are similar with it, and then messing around with comparing it with Premiere. And so the one thing that I wanted to start off saying is that as far as the command and control and command phase between Regs and 5th edition, there's a great deal of similarity, in that you're going to have a certain number of command points based on army leaders and corps leaders, or whatever the scenario might stipulate. And then you're going to be creating maneuver units using those command points. So that mechanism is going to be the same between the two systems. The ranges for, army leaders to corps leaders, and corps leaders to division leaders, and division and brigade leaders to their various and sundry units is also similar. And the only thing that is kind of markedly different is that in 5th edition, if you want to have that brigade or division or corps in command to create a maneuver unit with it, you have to have the leader of that division or that corps stacked with a unit of its command. In Regs, they don't need to be stacked with a unit. The units still need to be within range, and they need to be within range, but they don't have to be stacked with the unit in order to create a maneuver unit. So that's something that's different between the two. Is there anything else I may have forgotten at this point?
I would say the only other thing I
through-
would. Oh yeah, go ahead. You were gonna say. Go, Brandon.
Just extension through contacted units.
Yep.
Yeah. So I know that's something that we're going to be doing as sort of a house rule, but as far as with regs themselves, the only thing I could find that kind of stipulated that was like ammunition wagons and things like that being connected and having command through your ammunition wagon. But is it also for battalions and other stuff?
No, not normal. I didn't.
Yeah, there's
think
no
we were going to
communicating
use
battalions.
Right. So
Other than when they're in a like a column of
like road
um,
column.
a row column, or when they're
Company.
in a what's that march called? A
Administrative march. Yeah.
Yeah, those they can be in a strung out, and they are communicate.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Same
what
with
I
squadrons, right? Is that also true of squadrons?
thought.
Formed in column with cavalry, and it's 10
Yeah.
hexes long. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
but I mean everything is automatically connected. So with
Yeah.
so you're not going to have a break in the connection there
Yep.
with your cavalry. So that then brings up the next thing that's different, and that is when you go ahead and you create your maneuver units, the order that they come up in is different. So in 5th edition, the first time you draw a French maneuver unit, all, chit from the cup, then all the French maneuver units on the board move during that time. So you basically have if you had 4 or 5 maneuver units, they're all going to move. You got 10 minutes to get them moved and do their thing. And then the next time, an allied one comes up, doesn't matter which one you draw. It could be chit number 1, chit number 10, whatever it is. As soon as that comes up, then they all go on the allied side. In regs, each individual chit that you draw, that maneuver unit is the one that moves at that moment in time. And then you draw the next chit and the next chit and the next chit until all the chits have been drawn from the cup. And those include, of course, the reinforcements chit, which acts pretty much the same as it does in 5th edition. The regroup chit, which acts pretty much the same as it does in 5th edition. The leader movement chit, which acts pretty much the same. The only one that's different is the artillery chit, where in 5th edition only grand batteries fire when the artillery chit is drawn, or howitzers fire when the artillery chit is drawn. Here in regs, when the artillery chit is drawn, then all the artillery on the map that has a target, that's within range, has the ability or is compelled to fire in some cases.
Just more gratuitous violence.
It is. So basically, all the artillery is going to get 2 shots. It gets a shot during the artillery chit, and then at the end of the turn, when all of the movement has been completed, all the maneuver units have been pulled, then you have the fire phase, and that's then a simultaneous fire where all the infantry that have a unit adjacent, or if they're skirmishers, have a unit in range, are going to fire. And then all the artillery that have a target are going to fire. And so the artillery gets basically 2 shots, while the infantry is only going to get the 1 shot during that end of the turn fire phase, which is different than 5th edition and Premier, where that infantry might get a shot during offensive fire, as well as then during their opponent's turn as defensive fire. So this kind of nerfs the infantry fire combat by them only getting really that shot once during the turn instead of potentially twice that you'd have with 5th edition or Premier. All right. Any other questions at this point, or any comments on things that I might have missed?
I would just like to say, since I've got Premiere on the brain, I spent time being re-educated in Premiere for so many years, so that's all I know. But I reread. I'm halfway through the regs,
Okay.
and bits and pieces come back to me now because I remember from Marie Louise. But I would love it if we could in this go over and do an example of how an assault works, and also talk a little bit in depth on how cavalry charges work.
Yes, that's exactly what I was planning on doing. So we can, just for the sake of argument here, let's see if we can get ourselves some.
Let me charge. Quick thing though.
Yes.
The other thing that I noticed for me was the stacking doesn't require leader to stack; it just impacts your morale.
Correct. Yeah. So that is another. So there's a couple of other differences, right? So one, in 5th edition, to create a stack, you have to have a leader present in the stack. And so if you wanted to stack artillery with other artillery, or artillery with infantry, or multiple infantry battalions, you would need to have a leader. Here, you don't have to do that. You can have different units stacked, but there's going to be a penalty, and I think it's like a -3 on the on your morale overall. Is that correct?
-3 per unit.
Per
Yeah.
unit. Okay. So if it's a case where you've got 3 battalions stacked there, is it then going to be a -9 altogether?
No, it's -6.
-6. Okay. So the first one
gives
is
you
free,
-3.
and then the next 2 you're paying for. So the extra ones you're paying a -3 for. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. The other thing that's different is that in 5th edition, cavalry, any cavalry, whether it's in command, out of command, stacked with a leader, with a maneuver unit, whatever, it can always charge at the beginning of the French or Allied maneuver unit phase. So in this one, cavalry can only charge if it is part of a maneuver unit. So you'd either have to assign it a command point to create a maneuver unit if you wanted to charge with them, or if it's light cavalry, you'd have to make your initiative roll in order for them to have the wherewithal to launch a charge. So that's something that's dramatically different, because then you've got to kind of factor that in with how you're spending your command points. You've got to then, if you're doing something in combination with your infantry and your cavalry, you've got to then allocate a command point to that cavalry brigade or that cavalry division in order to get them to act. They can still reaction charge, they can still opportunity charge without being part of a command or being out of command or not having a maneuver unit, but they can't initiate a charge without
Being activated.
having a maneuver unit. Yeah. So let's go ahead. I'm gonna drop a couple of maneuver units here on the map, just so we've got something to work with. Let's see. We'll give one to some Russians over here, and then we'll get a few that we can drop in the bucket. All right, and French markers, let's grab a few here. So we've got...
As he's doing this, I think the biggest change for me really was moving one MU at a time. Because it's random, it creates really interesting situations where I can even, before I've even moved, the other team moved an MU and kind of pinned all my stuff. So now I don't even get to use my MU because all my stuff's already engaged with an assault or something.
Yeah, and then, but you can also rescue your guys, potentially.
Yep. It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So let's give these
What
guys...
do you mean by rescuing them?
So if they've been assaulted, you can then assault the guy who's assaulting you.
With a different
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of how that works. Okay, so we've got 3 chits for the Russians and 4 for the French. And then hopefully they all made it in there. All right, and then I got to find the other stuff for artillery chit, reinforcement, leader, and regroup. Okay. 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 Hopefully I got them all in there. All right. So we've got some stuff on the map there. We got some stuff to do. So then this is where we would go to the cup. And so you see the cup icon up there. You open that up. That's going to open up a little chart there. And if you just click on the cup and drag one of these chits over, then it flips it over and it shows you what it is. So in this particular case, we drew the regroup chit. So anything that's out of command could move then to regroup, provided it's not in the enemy zone of influence. Stuff that is, I think they can change formation. They can change stacking. There's some stuff that can happen with units that are not part of a maneuver unit. You can do some things with them, even though they're not part of a maneuver unit, to kind of anticipate either an attack that might be coming in towards you, or prepare them for something you might do with them next turn.
Right. The out of command units that are regrouping towards their leaders have to basically do it in the most expeditious manner. They can only change formation to go into um, um, uh, terrain that's
General order.
general order
Right.
and out of it again. But,
Okay.
and they can go, like, they can avoid obstacles, but basically they need to go as directly as they can, and they stop as soon as they get within command range of the command.
Okay, good. And then the other thing that is unique here with the regs, which I kind of like, is the ability for the players to assign core assets to a division or a brigade, as well as army assets to a division or brigade. So if you've got, say, some core artillery, you want to assign it to a particular division, you can do that, and then as it's going to be moving along when that division is activated, and regrouping towards that division, and basically attached to that division until such a time that you change its attachment. Is that correct?
Yes, and you can actually also you can attach army assets to the core. And
Okay.
if you give them a commander, then they kind of like act, for that stack, like if it's a couple guns from the army
Right.
level, then if you give them a commander, then they can act like a one of the commanders under that corps.
Right. Okay, cool. Going back to the cup, somebody else want to draw a chit from it just so you get the experience of how that works? Rick, have you drawn a chit from the cup before? Virtually?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and grab one for us?
Artillery.
All right. Yeah. So now what would happen is we would have the artillery that is out there on the field is going to fire, and so the French have some artillery, the Russians have some artillery. Is it any particular order that it goes? I couldn't remember, or is it whoever draws the chit first? I mean, it's still simultaneous fire, correct?
It's simultaneous.
Yeah.
We've always just, we just kind of move across the field and say, okay, these are firing there and these are firing whatever. So
Right. Now,
While we're on the subject of artillery, there are a
Yes.
couple of interesting differences. One relates to the fire defense of artillery. In 3rd and 5th edition, artillery has typically unlimbered has a fire defense of 8, but only every other hit counts. In Regs 30, typically the unlimbered artillery has a fire defense of 16, but all hits count. So that's like a slightly different way of achieving the fewer hits on unlimbered artillery.
right. And I'm trying to see here.
do they reflect that in the fire defense on this one?
It's in the charts. It's probably in the chart file.
Yeah, it's not in the built-in chart on this one.
Yeah. So it's the one that came in the box is the one that's here, which shows unlimbered has a value of 8. Limbered is 6, and with infantry it's 6 in the clear. Yeah. So, but I do know that generally speaking, usually with Marie Louise, the fire defense was 16. So I don't know if
There's a download of the PDF on, I believe, on the Bataille US site
okay.
with the regs 30 rules. There's another one that has a copy of the
The
charts.
charts, yeah. I downloaded that.
Okay. So does that one show the fire defense at 16?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So then what we should do is we should use that one as opposed to the one that's built into the module.
Right.
Okay. Cool. All right. And
One
Brennan,
of the things
what
that does
else?
technically for people is that, like in third edition, fifth edition, a classic tactic for countering artillery is to try to get your skirmish infantry within 2 hexes, so they can shoot the crews of the guns. In this one, you can still do that, but it's a lot less effective because even though the infantry is going to hit on every hit they score, it's a lot harder to score hits because the fire defense is a lot higher. So the artillery is pretty resistant.
Yes, which I think is how it should be. You know, this is one of the things that's really different from between all the different rule sets. The other thing is that we've got ricochet in regs, and it's different than the printed rules for ricochet in 5th edition, slightly, in that with regs, the ricochet is basically it's going down through that straight line. So if we're going to be firing, say, from here over there, and we've got these batteries all lined up firing this way, it's going to go through, it's going to go through, this target, and then it's going to hit the target back behind there unless there's some terrain that would block it. So it would hit here, and then it would hit here. And you would then just calculate the difference in the range, and you can only go out to long range. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this
Is
unit's
it long or extended?
So
Only long.
you only have long range in regs. So
Okay.
in 5th edition, you have extended range, which is basically half of your long range value. And I think it adds another 4 hexes or something like
Okay.
that.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah. And so the value for say shooting this stuff here at this hex at long range, and then we're still at the unit here that's got 9 can do it, but these 2 units then going here, there's no difference in their fire. So it's going to be 18 to whatever the value is there. I think what we were talking about, I think we all liked the fact that with 5th edition, for the next unit you hit and the next unit you hit kind of thing, there is a die modifier. So in the original regs rule, there's no die modifier. So you're here, we're firing at, if we're only firing, we'll just move this guy out of the way. We're just firing these 2. Here, it's going to be 18 to 9, and then here we're 18 to 6. And if there's something back here, it's another 18 to whatever until we basically get to long range or beyond our range. I think what we decided was we were going to use the 5th edition style where this one it's 18, and then here it's going to be 18 to whatever, but there's a -6 on your die roll. And then if there's another target that you're hitting further back, say here along the shot path, then you'd have a -12. And if it's a case where, given that there's no way that you could actually, roll the die, even if you rolled a 66, there's no way that you could hit it, then you wouldn't roll for it. Then you basically, that's your last, potential target with ricochet.
You can't make
These
fire. Go ahead.
the ricochet differences between third and fifth edition and Regs 30 make a really big tactical difference, because in third and fifth edition, a classic approach is to screen your heavier units with some skirmishers out front, because the skirmishers have good fire defense and they can take the artillery hit, and then it shields the units, second and third units back a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
Somewhat.
So if we had
In-
it here, you'd be firing, your first shot would be on these guys, which have, a better fire defense since they're skirmishers. And then these guys, you've got your shot at, but now you've got a -6 on your roll. And then these guys, you'd have a -12 on your roll. So, yes, having the skirmishers out front then is going to provide you some benefit for people that are behind, in that at least there's that die roll modifier that might save them somewhat.
But do you
in full
recalculate?
Regs 30, there's no modifier. So it actually makes it worse to have skirmishers in front, because you're just setting up 2 or 3 or 4 targets rather than having any protection.
Yeah,
To
basically,
use skirmishers for
there's no friction. Inertia does not exist in the Regs ricochet rules. They just
in Regs Ricochet, in order to screen units, you have to hustle the skirmishers way forward, get them to a range of 2 from the artillery, where they prevent medium and long range shooting.
yeah.
So it's very painful with the skirmishers, but that's the only way to block the artillery.
Yeah. So, all right, but I
The-
think
are
we,
the
as
odd-
far as the house rules, we were going to go with the 5th edition understanding of ricochet for the purposes of the game we're going to start playing next week.
And do you recalculate the odds for each one?
You would. So you're going to be looking at medium range, right? So say, for example, you're firing here 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So here, so say you're at a range of 4, right? So you're at medium range against this guy, and then as you carry on, as soon as you go and you hit this guy, well, now he's at long range. So instead of it being, what was this, 17 plus 17, that's going to be, 34 to 9 on this guy at medium range. Now it's 18 to 9 at this range.
Okay. And I'm correct in saying that you cannot make fire attacks at less than 1 to 3, because I think we always used to treat 1 to 3 as 1 to 3, no matter how bad it was.
Yeah,
Premier,
I mean,
right?
and usually, because in Premier, the as far as fire attacks go, if it's 1 to 3 or less, it's just 1 to 3. So you could have some poor unit somewhere holding up in a chateau, 100 guys with muskets, and you might roll a 65 or 66 and plink away some guys outside. In 5th edition, if it's less than 1 to 3, you're not allowed to fire. In Regs, I don't know if there's such a prohibition.
There is, yeah. I read that the other day.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then the same thing is true from 5th edition to that. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, and just to back up for 1 minute, I re-looked at that download. No, that download does not have the fire defense chart with the 16 in it. It doesn't even have a fire defense chart in it.
No, I was going to say that too.
There is, under the Linee one, there's a 100 days one that has a fire defense chart in it. That's that does have the 16.
David, I downloaded a PDF called Moscova 3 charts, Rev something or other.
Moscova.
and it has-
Let's see.
Up on page 1, it of that file, underneath the fire multipliers, it has the fire defenses.
Oh, okay. Moscova 3. Yep. Okay. Yeah. All right. So yeah, we should be grabbing that then. So it's on La Bataille US, and under the Battle of Moscow, there's the charts, and that has the fire effects and the fire defense and the movement. So yes, that's what we should be using for this.
All right. So that is the artillery chit. So the artillery up and down the line would be firing away at each other. I think Mitch had sent something about ammunition. So I know this particular module does not have ammunition wagons. Thank God. The
Yes, it
battlefield.
does.
It does? Oh, where are they?
They are.
Because I didn't see them on the order of battle chart.
Open up the one that says the plus, whatever, plus grand.
Ah, okay.
Up there, you will see French AAW and Russian AAW.
Oh, so sad. I'm sorry
It
you
is.
found those, David. So the question is then, do we want to use the ammunition wagons and, or just keep track of the ammunition intrinsically with the units?
Now, what I noticed, I just threw one on there. If you right click and say increment loss on that, it creates another counter. I couldn't find that separate. Oh, that one did. Okay, that one didn't do it like the other one did.
Yeah, because I think we used these ones here when we played it using 5th edition a few years back.
Right. Those.
And with these, then you could count down how many shots you had left. So you'd just decrease it, kind of thing as you went until you got to, however many shots, and then you resupplied it, type of a thing. So
Yep.
that's what we used. And then we just had that stacked underneath the artillery counter.
Now, did you do anything for resupply?
We did. We rolled for resupply, and I think we rolled for resupply at the end of every turn. So if you had expended one shot and you rolled a 5 or a 6, you were resupplied up to your, whatever your capacity was.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that now.
Yeah. So we did that, on the regular, and I mean, and that's, I don't know that we had very many guns that ever fell silent as a result of a lack of ammunition. But we've got options depending on what everybody wants to do, so we can think about that. But I know Mitch mentioned something about, and I don't think he's here with us this evening, but he'd sent something in one of the emails about using ammunition. So we can keep track of it if you guys want to. I'm not really a fan of it personally, but whatever.
Does clutter up the map.
They do clutter up the map, and they, it's, I don't know, Brennan, have you ever had a case where your guns have run out of anything?
Only at Vagram or by errors of positioning.
Yeah. So it's rather rare that you're going to not run out of supply for your guns, kind of a thing. So it then just becomes a bookkeeping thing. We've got to modify the counters every time we fire, and then we've got to spend a whole bunch of time rolling for every single, gun on the map and whatnot. So, but we can figure that out some other time. Let's go back to the cup and pull something here, unless we need to chat about anything else about artillery. Shall we move ahead?
Yeah, let's move ahead.
Okay. All right. Robert, why don't you go to the cup and
Okay.
draw something from the cup? All right. So you drew French
Maneuver unit
number 3, which I believe is cavalry right here. So there's some light cavalry there. So this would be your chance to move them and to conduct a charge. So why don't we, David, why don't you go ahead and do that so we can do a charge just so that we see what it looks like.
All right. Well,
And there's
the
this,
charge
there's these guys
procedure
right here
is,
that are just waiting,
yep,
waiting
just
to get
waiting.
hit.
So the charge procedure is slightly different in that you actually do your movement first, so that, and he can move up to his 14. So let's,
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
we can, we'll move, we'll give him something to shoot out over here.
All right. So
An interesting note in Regs 30 is that infantry can form square in response to cavalry during the cavalry's movement phase, as well as during its charge phase. That's a bit of
Correct. And they're going to want to have them facing towards a vertex, otherwise they're in column of companies.
right. So yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah. So this is the other thing, Robert, that's important is if your cavalry units are in column, so they're facing this way, you would put an extended line marker here because you could only have 4 increments there, and then the other 2 increments are there. And so then when you do the charge, these guys calculate their 4 increments against whoever you're hitting, and then these 2 increments calculate their combat against whoever you're hitting. And then you'd have to, I mean, if you've got look at these units, they've got 11 increments, they're going to be stretched out over 4 hexes, right? So talk about clutter. So generally speaking,
I saw that rule. I thought that was a lot of chrome.
Yeah, and that's why I think when we played, we intentionally did not play with column of companies because I did not like the general concept of it. It made things very, because we were playing on a map, and we would have had to have had extended line markers like all over the bloody place. So yeah, so generally speaking, you're going to keep them in line, and that way then they're all in the hex. No matter how big they might be, they're all considered in that single hex. Okay.
the
So
particular tactical reason for using column of companies at full length or a very, very wide extended line is if you need to cover and block a lot of terrain because you're typically on the flanks. When you have artillery or weak units that are maneuvering and you don't want them to get decapitated by a sudden Rick White light cavalry dash, which is really good, then you can set up even the cuirassiers, into these really long strung out blocks, and they can block a lot of ground that way. So on the flanks, you want to be aware of that.
And it changes their profile of the hexes that they cover too.
right.
When they're fully extended, then they can make a 90-degree quarter wheel left or right from that long column of companies into a very broad line and respond. So it expands out their reaction zones very greatly. So if you're maneuvering cavalry in wide open field situations, like then that kind of stuff is fun and very, very effective. And in fact, in wide open fields, it's quite difficult to protect, all around facings against sudden lightning strikes unless you use those deployed formations. But in tight quarters like we're looking at here, very often you wouldn't need to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So once you declare your charge, at that point, light cavalry has a 5 hex window for that they can charge into, which would extend out to here.
Is it 5 hexes or 5 movement points?
5 movement points. Well, it's 5 hexes is the zone.
Right.
You may not be able to reach all 5 hexes because of movement points.
Right.
But that's for this unit right here, that's his charge zone from
Yeah, basically
here.
that funnel, that cone.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I don't know that he could get here necessarily because he's got to go down the slope, and so maybe that
Right.
costs too much. So it would be the case that, if he's going to charge this direction, he might only be able to go that far, but everything else is kind of wide open. And so then he's got the opportunity to kind of, because it's clear he can make it. Okay, carry on,
So,
David.
so you're moving, you move, and then once you get within 5, you say, "I'm going to charge."
Right, or
5
you
or
can do it
4.
closer.
Yeah, you can do it closer now, but usually you want to do at least 3, or it's called a short charge, and you're halved.
Right, you want to try to
Oh,
go 3, 3 straight, or whatever.
okay.
Well, you can once you declare, you can't turn any now.
Right.
In it's that's your charge zone, and you're gonna, and it's 3 within that. It's going to be, it's always straight, pretty much.
Right.
You're
It's just your 2 front hexes sides you can go through. Okay.
Right, and so you can go here, kind of zigzaggy, right?
Yep.
Or you just go this way or whatever, this way and then this way, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Couple of quick notes. The short charge halving only affects charges against infantry or other cavalry.
Against
You
who?
can make the one infantry or artillery.
Okay.
If you're charging other cavalry, it's like a more fluid situation, so you don't get halved for a shorter charge.
Cool. All right. Do you want to start moving your guy?
And one of the other things here is you can't hit the same unit with two cavalry units.
Oh, okay.
So I'd have to basically to hit this one and maybe that one like that.
Right. And the dragoons are heavy cavalry. They have is it a range of 4 to intercept or reaction?
I'd have to look that up.
3.
3.
It's 3.
Oh, 3. And then light cavalry has a range of what?
5.
5? Oh, okay. I thought it was more than that. All right. Cool. So, but his zone is just right here. Right? So as long as your guy doesn't enter into his cone here, the Russian couldn't intercept you.
Right.
Yeah. And this guy's too far away to catch you there.
Now here's where the extended line, if he was in an extended line along there, then the zone actually extends out all the way to the left and right. It's not a V in front of it anymore.
If he were in column of companies or extended line.
Extended line.
Come on, work with me. So like this?
But it would need to be fully extended line.
Right.
So all 3 hexes.
Okay, like this. So then you're saying what's his zone?
His zone actually, and this is on page 51. His reaction charge zone actually extends out this way, and
in front. Cool. So he covers more ground.
Right.
Extended.
And you can see that on the
Oh yeah, and the regs. Yeah, I see that.
Page 51. So
if he was going to charge off to the flank, he would have to rotate 90 degrees into a column of companies and then reaction charge.
Okay.
It's a quarter wheel thing.
Okay. So he's basically either turning this way, well, of sorts, or turning
Yes, exactly. Just
that way.
that way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But
And
it's like really important when you're trying to protect large areas, because otherwise the funnels of a single hex line are really narrow, and there's lots of ways to get through them if you're not careful. So when you're trying to protect a vulnerable area, you typically will do it in these extended lines.
Right.
And
and
the extended line is are they in column or line form?
they're in line there.
Yeah. So this one's in line, but if we were to
Also in
turn
that
this guy
diagram, right?
this
Yeah,
way, then
that's
now he's in a column of companies.
right.
So here's his,
And he's
frontmost
got a
hex.
react. He's got a reaction zone of here, 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 here.
Oh wow. Okay.
Right. As well as out to the side this way.
Yep,
Oh, okay.
back there.
I could
So-
see where that's really good for controlling or covering large areas. Yeah.
Right. Now, when you actually do the combat, well, now you're nerfed somewhat because you've only got 4 increments that might be connecting with your target.
Okay.
So you've got more coverage, but you may only get a part of you're not going to get all 12 guys added up total sum. You'll have 4 increments, 4 increments, 4 increments. So you'll have 3 attacks at they're basically four strength points worth of your melee value each.
Each.
Don't do it.
Yes. Rick experimented with it.
I even
Alright.
tried doing a square with it. It also didn't work out.
Yeah, it did not work out so well. All right, so the infantry have the same potential as they do in the other games to form square, and they could actually form square even before you do the charge. If your cavalry is moves here within 4 hexes, and you haven't declared a charge yet, but you're 4 hexes out, this guy could try to form square, or he could wait until the charge commences, and then at some point along the path could make the declaration to form square. You're still going to be declaring targets when you get 2 hexes of a unit. So if this guy's here, he's going to say, this guy's not the target. And then he moves here and he says, now this guy's the target. So that mechanism is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the recall is slightly different too, depending on whether it's light or heavy.
Heavy cavalry units only permitted to make a recall once it starts the charge if a defending unit forms square. Other than that, no recall. A light cavalry unit gets 1 free recall at any time, which allows it to change targets or stop the charge. Or it can also make a recall roll if the target forms square.
Right.
Okay.
But if you're going to stand, if the infantry stand, then you're committed to whoever you've targeted.
But light have 1 free.
Yeah. But the
Recall.
light could potentially cancel the charge earlier.
Okay.
Right.
Is it only the skirmisher that can do the recall, or can a regular cavalry?
So if your light cavalry is in skirmish order, you wouldn't launch them into a charge. During the movement phase, you could have them change formation from skirmish into line or into column of companies, and then launch their charge. But if they're in skirmish order, they can't charge, they can't reaction charge, they can't opportunity charge. And that's similar to the other rule systems in that regard. So cavalry skirmishers work pretty much the same, from my understanding. All right. Do you want to do some sort of combat here so we can talk about results and regroup and all that? Not regroup, but what? Well, they call it something like that, don't they?
Oh, cavalry regroup. Yeah.
Yeah, cavalry regroup.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, so let's find the whole sequence of events here.
Get out the flow chart.
Actually, Jesse
Quick note
was
while we're-
creating
if it has-
a flow chart for that.
Quick useful note is that infantry in square does have a zone of control around it. In Premier, a square doesn't have a zone of control. In third edition, fifth edition, and 30th, they do. It's really useful because then the squares can block enemy infantry movement.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that.
They still have the penalty fighting against infantry. That is, the enemy infantry is going to get a bonus to their melee value attacking a square. And the cavalry attacking a square are going to be thirded. So that's the same across the board among the rule sets.
Couple things to note too. Also, cavalry unit does not need line of sight to a target in order to declare a charge, reaction charge, opportunity charge, or grand charge. But a potential target must exist within their charge zone. Then they may charge into, but not through terrain that blocks the line of sight.
Okay.
And all right, so where's the sequence? Charge.
So let's do an example here where this guy fails his pre-melee, his roll to stand.
Okay.
Right. So
All right.
what happens there? Usually,
Charge declared. Charge movement. Enemy reactions to charge. The reacting player may take the following form: square, cavalry options to forming square. If the target has not been declared, the cavalry may continue moving and declare a target at a later point. If the target has been declared, the target successfully formed square, the charging cavalry may attempt to recall. If they elect not to or fail to recall, charge and melee the combat unit in square. The target disordered from the square attempt. So if he failed, he would disorder.
right. But we're saying that he decides he's going to stand, right? He decides he's going to stand, and then he fails
target
his
square attempt. Okay, that's it's a target router from the square attempt. No, it's not a square attempt. Let's roll to stand. Reaction to the fish charge. Is there a roll to stand?
should have that option.
Might be under
Enemy
reaction to.
Enemy reaction is forming square. A. B. Reaction charge.
Stop. Rolling to 19.6, rolling to stand versus cavalry charge.
I'm trying to use the
All right, so yeah, 19.6, rolling to stand requires the top unit of the target stack to make a successful morale check using modifiers found on the roll to stand versus cavalry charge chart. If the morale check is passed, the defender delivers effective defensive fire, and their fire value is doubled. Roll a die to determine the number of defensive shifts received, if any. If the morale check is failed, the defending unit disorders or routes if already disordered. So this guy would then just disorder. he's going to then do defensive fire, but he's going to be halved because he's disordered, correct? And then there's not going to be any potential for a shift. His melee value is halved. And
Interesting. In the section where it just kind of, the 19.1, where it just goes through the whole procedure, it doesn't refer to give infantry it says cavalry can charge or stand, retreat before charge or stand. Where? Oh, okay. So it's actually it's actually after charge completion? No. Oh, okay. It's a whole different cavalry charge versus infantry and artillery. I'm looking in the wrong section. Okay. Well, roll to stand. Each target takes a morale check. Consult the roll to stand. They pass or fail. If they fail, they failing stacks not in square or in general order terrain, disorder or route if already disordered. All right.
Yep. So we'll say that this guy's disordered. We do the combat, and the chart for the regs combat chart is different. So let's see what our odds are. We'll just flip everybody over here and take a look real quick. So this guy's 18, and this guy's going to be 28 halved. It's going to be 14.
Well, the melee odds, again, is slightly different here.
Okay. How's that?
Or is that just for infantry? Getting confused here. Sorry.
That's why we're doing this. So we
Are you on page 43 of the rules, just going through that sequence?
Yeah, I was.
I guess it starts on 42.
Because there's a...
So the infantry is rolled to stand, and he said he passed or he failed.
He failed.
Okay, so he's disordered.
Yep.
Right. Unit fails not in a square or in general order terrain, disorders, or routes if already disordered. If all targets are routed or were eliminated, proceed to 6. If they're in square, general order terrain, or special structures, do not disorder. If they fail, however, their fire is not doubled, and they do not receive any defensive shifts. Now we go to defensive fire.
Right.
Defending units with the charging cavalry in its frontal hex side conducts defensive fire. Defensive fire is conducted as a fire attack with the usual modifiers plus any modifiers observed in step 2.
Right. So he's got his printed value is 8. It's halved because he's disordered, so it's going to be 4 to 4 to 9. So we'd roll the dice, see if we get a hit. A 24 is a miss. So then we would go to combat. He's got a melee value of 18. Halved, he's got a melee value of 14. So it's 1 to 1. And the leader is going to add...
well, to David's point, though, there are like things that double it and all that other stuff. Have you guys looked through that on the chart?
Well, let's take a look.
There is cavalry melee modifiers chart.
RTS versus charge. Melee modifiers. Okay. So they're not lancers. They're not hitting them in the flank. They're not heavy cavalry. They're not tired or exhausted. Target's not in general order or square. We're not preserving readiness. It wasn't a choice, a short charge. Heavy cavalry did not go 3 straight. And it's only heavy cavalry they'd get that doubling bonus for going 3 straight. So it doesn't look like there's anything that applies in this particular situation. So it would just be a 1-to-1 unless I'm missing something.
Were there any odds change from step 2 in the charge? Once all desired move.
Yeah, so if you fail your morale check, you don't get full or you don't get enhanced fire combat, defensive fire, and you don't get the potential roll for an odd shift.
Yep.
So it's just a straight up roll then on the, in this case, the 1-to-1 chart with a +2.
Uh-oh.
A couple of other quick modifiers to know about. They don't apply here, but they're part of cavalry charges. If the cavalry regiment that was charging were heavy cavalry, it would be doubled if it got a 3 hex chart. So that would make heavy cav is really, really strong against infantry and melee. Also, there are very, very tough modifiers to stand against heavy cavalry. Standing against dragoons, -9 morale. Standing against cuirassiers, armored cavalry, -12 morale. So the heavy cav is really good for breaking attempted stands. The other note, even in this situation, the defensive fire, even by a disordered unit, could score a hit. And for every hit that's done against the attacking unit, there's a -6 on the effects roll.
Yes. So if these guys got a hit on these guys, they would make a morale check as is usual. And then they would, when we roll for combat, they would then have a -6. And then their leader adds in 2, so they have a -4 altogether on their die roll. So let's say here we rolled a 52 on the assault melee chart, 1-to-1. That goes up to a 54. So that's going to be a DD1.
That part of that was incorrect. They do not take a morale check from charging units. Do not take a morale check from casualties resulting from defensive fire.
Oh, they don't. Okay.
Okay.
Will they do that during regular fire combat and opportunity fire?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
But the losses and the modifier for the losses caused by the defensive fire is applied
Happens
only
in the melee.
Correct.
Okay. I'm so used to it being the other way. All right. So in this particular case, we got a DD1 result. So this particular chap is already disordered. So the DD1 is going to cause him to rout, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he's going to lose 1 increment at least, right?
Yes.
Okay. And he's going back his full movement or movement plus 50%?
Movement plus
Okay.
Route movement is plus 50%. Yes.
Right. So he's going to go back. He's got 12 movement points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we'll just have him back here somewhere. Okay. Cool. So he's back here. So now we have pursuit. Correct.
Yeah, I'm getting back to that section 19.1 because that kind of synopsizes. All right, so we've got a melee resolution. If the target's PG, cavalry regroup. When the charge and any resulting melee is finished, both attacking and that's attacking defending cavalry. Never mind, I got to do under this one. Defensive to calculate melee resolution. Okay, DD1 DD number defending units become disordered and recoil. The number of hexes indicated. Units in special do not recoil. Or if they are already in disorder, they route per the usual second disorder rule. There's advance after charge. If any of the target hexes were vacated, charging units must advance into the vacant hex.
Okay.
The hexes were vacated because of melee. In step 5, the charging units become disordered. Mark them as disordered before they advance. If already disordered, they remain disordered but do not become PGD.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Quick note on the routed infantry unit.
Yep.
Routing units of any kind that route through their own, like typically they'll try to find a gap to route through.
Right.
But if they can't find a gap and they have to go through a unit, there's a -12 morale modifier for the unit that they're stomping through. So you really want to leave gaps so you don't have to take that -12.
Yeah, that's painful.
I think in 3rd and 5th edition it's -6, but here it's -12 for the route.
All right. So at that point, they attempt. After any retreats are conducted, cavalry that does not recall must pursue the retreating units. There is no pursuit if the target units were eliminated prior to this step. So you would roll for a recall then.
Okay. So he advanced into that hex, and then we're rolling for regroup now.
He rolls for a recall.
Oh, for recall.
If
Okay.
not, if not, he's going to pursue.
Pursue. Okay.
It just, I think it's probably worth switching the attitude. I mean, if he wants to pursue, he pursues. If he decides he'd rather not pursue because it's going too deep into the enemy lines, then he can try to recall.
Okay. All right. So it's not like in Premier where the recall is almost a penalty. If you don't do it right, kind of a thing. Then you have to do something insane. All right. So here, then you could just say, okay, I choose not to. But he could advance. So how far could he advance? He could advance up to what, 3 hexes, I think?
All right. So after retreats are conducted, cavalry that elects not to recall or does not pass a recall check pursues and follows exactly the path of retreat up to 3 hexes.
Okay.
Okay.
So he could
If he
go
does it-
another couple of hexes, and then that would do damage to this guy, correct? So the unit
Yes,
that routed away, it would do an
1 point of
additional
damage.
two increments of damage, correct?
It does 1 point of damage for every hex you decide to pursue.
Right.
Against a routed unit, you can pursue up to 3 hexes. And because you're light cavalry, the pursuit inflicts 1 extra damage above whatever you pursue.
Just for kicks.
Yep. Like
So-
that guy conceivably could route back in front of he could try to drag the cavalry across the front of the muzzles of the artillery, which would be a fun game. That's why the cavalry might want to recall.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if this is the case, then he's going to stop here because he's light cavalry. He didn't do any pursuit. I mean, he obviously advanced into the hex that was vacant, but if he'd advanced 1 more hex, for example, then he would do 1 point of damage for that hex that he advanced, plus 1 for being light cavalry, correct?
Yeah, but I think he has to go the full 3. It's either 0 or the full 3.
Oh, okay. So it's not a case where it's It's all or nothing.
Well, actually, since it's a route, if it was just like a DD result, the number of hexes which cavalry may pursue is the number of hexes the defender recoiled.
Right.
To
So
ride
if
it
the
to-
guy,
I
if
did
the
think
if he hadn't been
Regroup.
disordered previously, and you got
Right.
the DD1, then he would
can
just be right
go on.
here, and he would be disordered, and he would only have gone back one hex, and so there wouldn't be anywhere to pursue
Right.
per se. If it was a DD2 and he's here, then the cavalry could go forward one more hex and inflict a pursuit damage to him, correct?
Yes.
Plus a light cav loss.
Plus the bonus for light cav. Okay. So let's say that's one of the examples that happens here. So then he moves here. He's then so the unit's going to take one loss for the loss in the melee, right? The DD1. Then he's going to take two more losses for the one hex of pursuit, and then the
Correct.
and then the one hex of whoops,
Or the one loss of
the
for
bonus
like-
loss for against light. So he's at the end. He's taken 3 hits. Okay, all right. And then this guy is disordered. This guy is disordered. Now our cavalry can do something interesting or exciting. Correct? They can do the regroup.
Cavalry which wishes to end a pursuit may attempt to recall, roll a die and passing die roll means the pursuit ends. Failure means the cavalry must pursue up to the allowable limit. There can be opportunity reactions during pursuit, which means like opportunity fire or opportunity charges can happen, be triggered. Then is cavalry regroup. When a charge, including reaction and opportunity charges and any resulting melee is finished, both attacking and defending cavalry, which did not rout, recoil, or bounce, may cavalry regroup.
Right.
So
Each stack may expend up to 5 movement points to move away from their current location. Cavalry regroup is voluntary and may trigger opportunity reactions. So in this particular case, the guy might not want to stick around there. Instead, he could then move back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or something like that.
Yep.
Bob,
Okay.
that's a really important difference in the cavalry charges because everybody remembers in 3rd and 5th edition how you make a really cool offensive charge and you're stuck out in the middle of the enemy's lines. So this gives you 5 movement points to back up. Very important. The other thing that's very important is that a lot of times at the spot where you launch your charge, you very often were in command. But by the time you get out to the far end of your charge zone, it's often you've galloped away from your leader. So this gives you a chance to regroup back into your leader's command zone so that next turn you'll be in command.
Oh, wow, that's
Which is
So
That's
the
cool.
additional 5 movement points for regroup is above, beyond their basic allowed movement potential.
Yes.
Right. So for example, when they're doing their charge, they're only charging 5 movement points. So they might have moved, 10, 12, 14, their full movement to get to the place that they launched their charge from. They basically can only go forward 5. And then as the result of the melee, they could potentially end up 3 hexes, 4 hexes further on because they pursued somebody who routed. And then they've got to try to extricate themselves from that position. So if there's no one around, well, then that's not a big deal. But if now you find yourself behind enemy lines, rather deep, then it could be problematic.
what it means tactically is that the light cavalry is extremely dangerous from very far away in openings. like once the front lines have gotten dense and there's heavy fighting going on, the light cav is not as dangerous. But in the approach stage, when there are gaps and chinks and stuff, the light cavalry can often find these incredible racing tracks. It moves, that's a chasseur. It can move 14 movement points into the backfield, then charge. It can hit something that's 19 or 20 hexes away and then escape. It could even move forward after a successful charge. It will have gone like 24, 25 hexes deep. So strike and move out beyond. It's very, very effective against artillery, ammo wagons, routed units, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
And-
with that regroup, this guy here, say for example, he pursued, and he ends up over here. Well, he's got 5 movement points left. He could, as Brendan said, he can move. He doesn't have to go back. He's got 5 movement points that he can use any way he wants. A lot of times you're going to want to pull him back, but as Brendan said, you could push him forward depending on what the circumstances are.
Or who's driving him?
Yes, or if Rick is if Rick is at the reins, then God help you. So, all right, let's just
I got a question there. So every time you charge, your charging cavalry will always be disordered at the end.
If they melee, they end up disordered. Yes.
Yep.
Oh,
And then
That's true with infantry too, right?
yeah, and typically with infantry too, it's also the case where they're going to end up disordered. Well, and we still have to mark this guy as exhausted, correct?
Yeah, but that gets done at the end of the at the end of the regroup.
Right. So he's regrouped back, and we're just gonna we'll put an exhausted marker on him, just for fun. Okay, so
there are no. Okay.
Yeah, so he's done. And then let's do this one. Let's say this guy passed his morale check, so we can see what things look like when they get the bonus for their fire. So I think these
Just
guys,
a couple of quick notes
Sure.
on the tail end of the chart. One thing that can stop a pursuit is another cavalry unit's zone of control. So if there had been a Russian cavalry unit defend, like down in the ravine or something, the infantry could route past it, and that cavalry unit's zone of control would block the pursuit. So that's good to know.
Yeah. So if
And
we
then
had
another
something
thing-
here, yeah. Yeah. So for example, if there was something here or whatnot, yeah. Okay.
So that's helpful because your cavalry units can support the routing infantry that way just by being there and having zones of control that screen out incoming cavalry. And the other quick note on the regroup is that we just saw the attacking unit make a regroup back. But if there had been a reaction charge, then the defending reacting cavalry unit also would get a regroup move.
Right. So say we had this unit here intercepted, right? Then we'd conduct the combat, and depending on what the result is, then potentially both of these cavalry units could regroup back. So it's
Yes.
not just the person who's the attacker, it's also the person who might be doing the reaction charge. But that's not the same for an opportunity charge, is it? Is it only reaction charges that get the regroup?
It's including reaction and opportunity charges.
Cool.
And the resulting is if both attacking and defending cavalry can regroup, which if they did not rout, recoil, or bounce.
Okay. So basically, if you got a result that,
Was not a rout, recoil, or bounce.
right. Okay. Cool.
So you don't use charge markers in this game. You just move when it's at your MU, and then you say, "I'm charging."
Yes.
You
gotta mark the guys that you're going to be doing the charge with your charge
Right.
markers.
You've got to complete all the movement for that move. And you say like that move, if a move has 5 cavalry units, but you're only going to charge with 2, you've got to complete the move with all 5, but you mark you when you finish the one that you're going to charge with, you mark them with a charge marker.
Okay. At the end of their movement. Okay.
Yep.
When they're within 5 hexes.
Right.
Okay.
Couple of other quick notes since we're talking about opportunity charges and so on, reaction charges. So if there had been a reaction charge, then the reacting unit would be the attacker in the melee.
Right, and that's the same as
also-
5th edition.
Yes. Also in Regs 30, if there is a reaction charge followed by a melee, the reacting cavalry is exhausted, not just tired. Like in 3rd and 5th, the reacting cavalry will it's only like a half charge. So they get tired by a reaction charge, but here they get fully exhausted, which is interesting to know. And then another thing is to just to be aware of how multiple cavalry units fight other multiple cavalry units. In 3rd edition or 5th edition, you can have in a charge, you can have a charge and a reacting charge and a reacting charge. You get these incredible tornadoes of cavalry, which is really cool. In Regs 30, you're only allowed to do 1-on-1. So there's one reaction, and that defines the melee. So as the attacker, if you want to come after that cavalry that reacted, what you do in order to get it later is you bring another MU, another cavalry group up later when its chit is full. Now that reacting cavalry will have reaction charge, fought, regrouped, and become exhausted. Now it can't get away. That second MU's worth of cavalry has a much better chance of breaking its way through opposing cavalry than the original. So it's you succeed by bringing up multiple MUs of cavalry in a narrow zone.
Data analysis shows too many variables.
All right, so let's do this one here. So we've got fire coming from that converged grenadier. Let's see, I think they're times 4. So that's
Interesting thing. Just click on it and hit Control V.
Control V. Oh yeah, it's got it there. Handy
There
dandy.
you go. In line, they're times 4, and square, they're times 3.
Cool. Yeah, not all the modules have that, so nice. That'll save us a little bit of looking up. All right, so that's going to give us 16, and then we're doubled because we passed our morale check. So we're going to have 32 to 9. So we're going to be at 3-1, unless they've got something more precise. We'll roll the dice and see what we get. A 41, a 44.
Should be a hit if I remember right.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a hit.
3-1, 22 to 55. So
Yep.
yes, that's a hit.
So that's a single hit. So there's no morale check on the unit, but they will have a minus 6
when we
on
get
the
to
roll. Yep.
To the melee part. Too.
Yep. So now we would. So then we have to roll to see if there is a defense shift, and
Where
we
is
just
that?
roll a single die.
Single die. Yep.
Yep. So we rolled a 2, so we didn't achieve it this time. But if you
Where is
go
that?
to, let's see,
Page 43. You'll see 1 through 3 is a 0 column shifts, 4 and 5 is 1 column shift, and die roll of 6 is 2 column shifts.
So you make that roll anytime
They
you melee?
they pass their roll to stand.
yes. So that's true in melee caused by a cavalry charge, as well as melee caused, infantry action. So, and you'll also find it if you go to the melee modifiers chart there under the regs. It's in the top
see it.
right corner. A 1 through 3 is nothing. A 4 or 5 is 1 shift to the left, and a 6 is 2 shifts to the left. So it can get pretty brutal. I've found that this particular system tends to favor the defender very heavily. All right,
Okay.
so
You kind of
here,
imagine when those rolls score you a column shift, you're imagining a defensive heroism like Andrei Balkonski steps up waving the flag, or in Squad Leader when you get a hero creation, at the
yeah, it's something where they wait until the whites of your eyes kind of a thing, and give you a good blast. So it's a 1-to-1. I think the cavalry's got 15. These guys have got 14 or something like that. Yeah, so it's a 1-to-1, but they'll have a -6 because they took that one hit. So we roll the dice. A 21 is going to get modified down to an 11. So if we go to the assault chart, a 1-to-1 and 11 is going to be a
Attacker routes.
attacker routes.
quick tactical note.
Yep.
Generally, don't send your light cavalry to charge formed infantry. Use the cuirassiers and dragoons for that. The light cavalry is really good against disordered or routed units, but it basically is lightweight and doesn't do all that good against formed infantry.
Yeah. So it's going to take its loss, and then it's going to route away at 100 and 50% more than
Yep.
its usual. So it will move. It's got now a movement of 21.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
So
On
it's-
the assault melee chart, it has a column that says firefight. What is that?
oh yeah, we'll get to that. That happens. Does that happen with? I don't think that happens with a cavalry charge. But if you get a blank
That's
result
fighting
for infantry,
infantry, when there's a bounce, then you do a second round using that column only. It's rare.
yeah. All right, so that takes care of that example. So I think we got a fair idea of kind of how cavalry works, and I'm sure we will stumble our way through that some more as time
And-
goes by.
And the rules are very good for just laying out you just follow it along, follow the procedure, and reference that 19.1 is a nice synopsis, and then you can go to it has references to the detail of each section if you have a question. So
Okay.
Good.
it's pretty easy to work along.
Okay, so we go and we would then draw whatever our next maneuver unit is. And now it's the Russian maneuver unit number 2, which is these dragoons. So now at this point, then, if the Russians wanted to, they could move their guys around. They could charge this guy that's exhausted. They could, whatever it is that they want to try to do with this maneuver unit. Are there any examples that we want to try to use with this, or move on to some infantry combat?
We could just mention briefly that this situation is a really good example of how heavy cavalry can catch light cavalry. Normally, light cavalry not exhausted can retreat before combat. So if you charge the dragoons against the lights, they just back out, back away. But when they're exhausted, they can't do that. So then they're incredibly vulnerable to heavy cav counter.
Cool. The other thing that is of note is if you are doing combat and you're in line and you have 2 hexes against 1 hex, or 3 hexes against 2 hexes, then the guy that's got sort of this extra hex gets a melee
Overlap.
modifier.
Yep.
Because they're kind of, if you think about it, they're kind of wrapping around your flank. So whoever's got the more hexes is going to be boosted by 50%.
If we just quickly go through the modifiers on that particular charge, you've got the Russian dragoons coming in. They're heavy cavalry versus light cavalry. So they're doubled.
Right.
Then they're also multiplied by 1.5 because they have a wider spacing. Then let's calculate the French. The French are 18 points of melee, but they're disordered, so they're halved down to 9. They're also exhausted, so they're thirded down to 3. And they're also being charged without being able to move in response. They're not making a reaction charge, so they're halved again. So that's a 1.5 from 18 down to 1.5. That's a 5-to-1 attack right there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
then-
probably a 5 that you could probably there's that you can make an attack where you're not going to exhaust yourself. I forget what they call it in there. You could probably do
preserving
it in that-
readiness.
Preserving readiness. You could probably do it in this case and still keep the 5-to-1.
Yeah. Yeah. If you preserve
Right.
readiness, you third yourself. So, and then
So
if we
what
say,
that's telling you from a tactical point of view is that French light cavalry division that charged, it was a cool charge, but it's very vulnerable. So you actually want to do that kind of thing when you have a second or third cavalry MU nearby who can be within its reaction charge distance to support them. Because then if the dragoons come in, if you have another light cavalry unit that could soak it off, or a heavy cav unit that could respond directly, then you can save those exhausted guys from getting hammered like that. So even though the light cavalry is very powerful on its own, it's a whole lot safer to maneuver with multiple groups and not to charge the whole division every unit. So there's always somebody to help you out against the counter.
right. So like, for example, if we're looking over here at this group of cuirassiers, Russian cuirassiers, right? I think there's 5 units here. You might bring these guys up and you might have, 2 of them charge, and then you're keeping the others back as basically to help support or to reaction charge to defend the guys that were involved in the action.
Which is extremely historical. Like Wellington had a standing order that when a cavalry division engaged, only 1/3 of it was supposed to engage and 2/3 were supposed to be in support.
Right.
Here's a perfect example of why.
Yep. So you don't end up getting hung out to dry. Okay. Any other sort of cavalry examples that we want to try to talk about or do, or should we then move on to try to do an infantry example of some sort?
Well, last quick note is about cavalry charging artillery batteries. In 3rd edition and 5th edition, if there's a dangerous artillery battery that's causing a whole lot of trouble, a lot of times the response is to get a really big, strong cavalry unit and go charge the battery head on. That often works. In Regs 30, that usually will fail, especially charging some of the French Guards artillery, which has really, really good morale. It's almost impossible to get the artillery to break. The French can often charge direct against Allied artillery batteries using cuirassiers or dragoons because they have a very strong morale modifier, which has a good chance of forcing the Allied artillery to disorder when it's charged directly. Then you can melee it. But it's still risky, a lot riskier than in 30.
Right. And well, do the melee modifiers count? I guess it says do not apply to elite units. So I guess if it's Guards artillery with a morale of 11, I would guess it falls under the elite unit category.
Yes. It's like 11 through 13 is elite. So a couple of those French batteries would be vulnerable to a cuirassier charge, but the Guards artillery are basically not.
Yeah, these guys here. I mean, I guess you could still roll an 11.
Yeah, but not much. On the other hand, these 2 batteries here, they could conceivably be susceptible to a charge if they're causing trouble for the Russians. You could try a cuirassier charge against them to get -12 on the stand roll. So it's still a risk, but it's better than nothing.
Right. And the other thing to think about is that the opportunity fire is halved. So if we were to do a charge here where these guys are going along here, whoops, and they move from here to here, right? This is only half instead of being a full value for the shot.
Right.
And for the defensive fire, is it only this guy that does the defensive fire, or do these guys add in?
Only the target.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's similar to 5th edition as well. So opportunity fire is nerfed in this. It's half its usual value. So
I ask on a cavalry charge, is it limited to one cavalry unit against one target hex, or can 2 cavalry units attack a target hex either from the same hex or from separate hexes?
You can do a stack, so you could have 2 regiments charging in a stack. You would probably want a leader because otherwise their morale will be reduced. But so from a single hex you can, but you can't do multiple hexes unless you use a grand charge, in which case you got like 9 hexes.
right. So you couldn't have these two guys both assaulting that, charging that set of guns.
Right.
Unless they were led by Uvarov or somebody in a grand charge.
Right. Or on the French side, Marat. So you could have them do it if they're stacked like this, then they could, but they would suffer the -3 penalty for the stack. And I don't know what
That would
the
actually
stacking
be
limit is as well.
Yeah, that would be an illegal stack.
Yeah, because it's too big. So, yeah. So, but all the cavalry charges are happening during that moo chit. So you draw the thing, you move your guys, you do your charges. All the results of all the charge, everything is done. You've then regroup your cavalry back, or whatever the case might be, and then you go on to the next chit. So if you're using the cavalry and you happen to get them come up when you want them to be drawn, then you have the potential of breaking through, and then having a gap then for your infantry to exploit or additional cavalry to exploit. But you never know if that's going to happen because the chit pull is random. So you could, have something where you really want to go with these guys, and then you've got, your infantry ready to follow up, but things get drawn in the wrong order. You draw the infantry, and then the cavalry gets drawn sometime later in the turn. And what do you do? What decision do you make? Do you do the charge anyway? Do you, hold back and wait for another turn where maybe things get drawn in the order you'd want them to? And Robert, you've got lots of experience with that.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Marie Louise, I had a whole frustrating game where nothing ever came in the order I wanted.
Yeah. So
I remember that. That was frustrating.
Well, you should probably expect that to be happening here too. So, all right. Do we want to do some infantry assaults just so we know what that looks like?
So that is real different in this.
Okay. So, David, or Rick, do you want to grab some French units and throw them higgly-piggly against some Russians?
David can. I don't do infantry.
You move them around, but they're just there to cheer on the horsemen. Is that correct?
Exactly.
You'll
Come on
notice that if you take the letters that form the last name, white, and if you turn them upside down, it spells Murat. More or less.
Nice.
More or less.
More or
more or
less.
less. Yeah.
So, well, you'd never want to do what we're going to do here, but usually what you try and soften up a position that you want to assault with skirmishers first. Hopefully try and get something disordered and everything like that. Assaults with infantry occur at a distance, unless you want to use elite units. And there you can, because they don't have the negative modifiers. But you would want to, you usually try to start your assault from as far away as possible. And you declare it at that point. So the if there's a chart, in this case it's under the RTC/RTS versus assault tab on the regs here. First chart shows you the roll to close modifiers chart. So you actually declare your charge like you're back here. So let's just say these 3 units are going to charge up there.
Okay.
So let's see, is there a charge thing here? Change label.
Yeah, hopefully there should be an assault
There's
marker.
an assault one. Yeah. No. Is there an assault? Yeah, there it is. Okay, it's the first one. So you say, I'm going to charge with these units. Now at that point, you put a number under the assault number of the distance to the closest enemy unit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right, but let's say these skirmishers are over here, right? These Russian skirmishers are here. Now this guy's 3 away, even though the target he's going for is maybe 4 or 5 hexes away. But now it's your distance to the closest enemy unit. So it might not be who you're going at. Here this guy's planning on going way out here, but there's these Russian skirmishers over here. So now that would be factored in. But for the purpose of the example, we'll move that back out of the way.
Right. So
Question there, does spacing matter? So like if they're not in my front, would I still count it as being closer?
if it just says the closest. So
Right, so it says distance from the assaulting stack to the nearest enemy combat unit. So it has nothing to do with your front, flank, or anywhere else.
It's basically some type of momentum index. You have to imagine them beating the Padishar, rump, 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 thump, thump. And the closer the enemy is, wherever he is, the less momentum they get up. But if they start that drumbeat pretty far away from wherever any enemy is, then they get some momentum going on the route.
Right. It's basically the guys are building up confidence. I mean, you can still go in from a closer distance, but what's going to happen is, here at this particular battle, we're all using the French chart. So if you're 6 away, it's +3. So it'll help you pass your pre-melee morale check. If you are 5 away, it's 0, and then anything closer than that, you are negatively affected rather dramatically.
-3, -6, or -9 to that.
Yeah.
Pre-melee morale check.
Oh, wow.
Close.
Okay.
Right. So unless you're an elite unit, because they don't have adverse modifiers.
Okay.
Yeah. And the only time that you get and so the other thing is that the attacker is making their Yeah. So go ahead, carry on with the movement and stuff like that, Dave, and then we'll kind of go through the sequence.
Okay. So let's, we'll. I'll just stick that behind him, just so we.
A lot of times, if you have, say, an infantry division, you'll be using the forward battalions of it to do the softening up by musketry. And the battalions out of the division that are actually making these assaults, they usually come from the back ranks of the division up through a checkerboard.
Okay.
Like you'll put some light infantry skirmishers, you'll get into a firefight up here, you'll try and get some hits on them, maybe disorder a unit, because you can actually do this charge through a skirmish unit. If you had skirmishers up here, it actually displaces those skirmishers. So let's, before that, in this case, if that was a skirmish there, skirmishing before that charge was initiated, he could come up and displace that skirmisher. He actually disorders and goes back.
And there's no opportunity fire for that happening.
Right.
So the idea is that the skirmishers are out there engaging the line, maybe getting the guys to fail the morale check, getting some hits on them. And then you would bring in your battalions, attacking when everyone is in great shape. You want it, you'll discover very quickly, you want to do your assaults when the other guy is disordered. If you're assaulting the guy and he's in good order, or he's, has a decent, he's only taken one or two hits kind of a thing, it's going to be
Right.
really dicey that you're going to have any success. So, okay.
So now okay, so this move just moved. We're done for the moment until all the other moves are done.
Yep. Yeah, so now we go back up to the cup, and so all of this stuff is waiting for the end of the turn. So this is why in this particular case, so say now the Russian draw this chit, well, now they could charge these guys that are coming forward to melee these chaps. And these poor guys are going to be in a world of hurt because they're kind of hanging out there.
Yeah.
And so they have to then try to roll to stand. And they've got they'll have a negative modifier, not only for who's charging them, but because they're under an assault marker, they've got a -12 on their roll to stand. And now this guy's disordered. I mean, so all kinds of horrible things can happen. Depending on how
you
the
can
chits
also
go.
feed troops into it too.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so we could probably move. Yes, just put a few units up here, just so we have something that you can throw into the fire.
So after the end of movement, we got that right. So
yeah.
All right. So the first step. So we complete all the other moves. We do the fire offensive, or it's not offensive. It's not defensive fire than offensive fire, like in Premier. It's simultaneous fire. So we go along but these don't do their fire yet. Anything that's marked with an assault here does not do their fire during the regular fire segment.
Okay.
Right.
So
it's
going
to
fire segment. Everybody else.
Yeah. So these guys fire, and the guns over here fire, and these guns over here fire, and whatever. But these ones don't fire because they're under the assault marker.
Right. So then we go into the next phase after all the firing's done is the assault phase. And so first part is automatic advance. If the target hex was vacated prior to resolution of this assault, assaulting units must advance. into the vacated hex. They may immediately declare an assault on any units in their front hex sides. So if for some reason this got hit with something uh, and routed away, and this hex was vacant, he would automatically go in, and if there was something in his front hex side, he could actually uh, join that as
Yeah.
do an assault on that.
Yeah, like for over here, we got this battery. They could take a shot there during the fire phase or during maybe the artillery phase or whatever. They could get
Right.
a couple of hits on this one potentially, and if it was already disordered, they could if it fails its morale check, then it would rout away, and then this guy could advance in, and he could then attack here, here, or here if there was somebody there.
Yep.
Okay.
Next is retreat before assault. So certain units are eligible to retreat before an assault. That happens now. So like retreat before
Skirmishers.
assault may trigger opportunity reactions and may suffer harassment. But yeah, it's basically skirmishers or cavalry can retreat before infantry and that type of thing.
Limbered guns, that sort of
So-
thing.
Then we get to round one. Attacker does his roll to close. Since he came at this number then plays into what part of his adjustments are to his roll to close modifier. So if they started the assault from only 2 hexes away, it would be at -6, I believe, from that. No, -9
-9,
to
yeah.
their roll to close if they started at 2, and that you actually have to be at least 2. It sounds like. No, if it's adjacent, it's -12. So if they started adjacent and decide to assault, -12.
Wow.
And-
Okay.
You only want to do that with an elite unit because they don't. There's no negative modifier for that. And so they do their roll to close. If they pass, they multiply their offensive fire value by 2. If they fail, they disorder and will melee in that state or rout if they're already disordered. So if something disordered one of those units before we got to this part of the turn, then if it disordered with it failed its roll to close, then it would rout out. Then defending units roll to stand. If they pass, their defensive fire is multiplied by 2, and then they roll a die for the column shift. And again, that's that 1 through 3. It's a column shift of 0, 4, 5. It's 1 column shift, and 6, 2. If they fail, they're not in a special structure. They disorder or rout if they're already disordered. Unless all assaulting units fail their roll to close.
Well, and if
If-
they're in general order, they don't make a morale check, do they? Or they
it's a
make the
special-
morale check only to see if they get the double fire value.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't cover that one in the synopsis here, but
Okay.
it would be under the detail there. It says not special structure. If all defending units routed, proceed to step 6, which is advance after assault. So if for some reason they routed away before the assault closed, type thing. Next is offensive and defensive fire. They simultaneously exchange fire. For each casualty inflicted by defensive fire, the melee resolution die roll is modified by -6. For each casualty inflicted by offensive fire, the melee resolution die roll is modified by +6. Defending units must have an assaulting unit in their front hex side in order to perform defensive fire. Units involved in the assault do not make morale checks from casualties resulting from offensive or defensive fire. Okay, we have no British here, so we don't have to worry about the British huzzah charge. Then we determine the melee odds. The odds are calculated as a ratio of attacker melee value to defender melee value. Consult the melee modifier for infantry and artillery chart. Shift the odds according to the number of shifts obtained in step 3A or 3C. 3A and 3C were the, wait. I don't know what 3A and 3C were. Oh, the shift for the column shift. 16.6. And the melee odds is a result of the sum of the melee values, printed melee values, plus their modifiers of all the assaulting units are divided by the defending units. There's something in the back of my mind that I don't, and I'm not seeing it here. Maybe it's in the roll to close chart. Close modifiers. Assault odds, morale check modifiers.
All right, so
There's there's a chart here, and I'm trying to think of where this fits in here. It's the assault odds morale check modifier chart.
So one interesting modifier there is in 3rd edition and 5th edition, you do a strength comparison, a quantity comparison by increments. Like if it's 12 increments attacking 3, that's a 4-to-1 odds ratio of strength.
No, it's not by increments. It's
in Regs 30 it's by hexes.
Regs.
In Regs 30 it's by number of hexes, and what that means is if you can create a situation where you've got like 3 or 4 units surrounding another, they get quite a benefit of their morale, right. And the defender has a reduction. Yeah, so but it's by number of hexes attacking.
Right. So it's if there's 1 hex, there's no modifier. 1-to-1, there's no modifier. If there's 2 hexes on 1, they get a +3. You know, and all the way up to 6 hexes.
Like in our example here, if you were the French charging up, you probably would take the 2 right-hand battalions and attack the grenadier in the clear, and then the left-hand battalion might, like 2 of those would attack the grenadier. That's 2-to-1 in the odds ratio, and you might leave the artillery alone. Kind of.
Yeah.
That's better yet, you would bring up a 3rd battalion in the further hex to the right, off the flank of the grenadier, if you could get it there,
right?
And then you'd have 3-to-1 plus the flanking.
Right, somebody over here.
Yep. So that gives it that. So on that, so that is part of the roll to. I believe the roll to close modifier.
Roll
right?
to close. Yep. Roll to close.
Okay, so
there's also a cool Regs 30 modifier, which is kind of an indication of recommended tactical approach. One is use as many hexes as you can, multiple hexes on 1 defender, not 1-to-1. Another interesting one is increments. I think it says if the defender has only 2 increments left, but the attacker has like 4 more, then there's another one. So to some
Yeah.
extent, that's showing you that you're trying to wait until the defender is quite reduced down to low increments, and then you just battering ram through. Like that's the time for the assault.
Yeah, see, if the target hex has 2 or less increments of infantry and no artillery increments, and the assaulting unit has 4 or more, it's a +9
Right.
to
So
that.
the roll to close is just how far away you started, and then
With these other
those other
modifiers.
modifiers that are there in that table. The
Yes.
roll to stand uses the odds assault morale chart, and then the roll to stand versus assault melee chart. So, those Russians are on higher ground, so they're going to have a +3 to stand. If they were behind a stream, there'd be another +3. So all of those different things kind of factor in. So there's potentially pluses and minuses for the defender, but there's only one possibility that you can get a positive modifier as the attacker, and that's the one that Brennan had pointed out, where the hex has only got 2 or fewer increments of infantry and no artillery. Otherwise, you could have this quote unquote 3-to-1 attack. You're hitting him on 3 sides, but that doesn't at all help these guys make their roll to close. Now they're still going to go in. So say this guy fails, he's disordered, he's going in, but he's disordered. This guy fails, oh, he's going in, but he's disordered, right? So they still make the attack. So that's different than in the 5th edition, where they rout and they disorder and they move away, and so they don't conduct the attack. In this case, they do conduct the attack, but they're just conducting the attack disordered.
Yep.
Yeah.
One other thing, other modifier, is that because these armies, the French army and the Russian army, were operating basically in column most of the time, they need to launch their assaults from 6 hexes away in column. If they're in line, they get a minus modifier. So they typically don't assault from lines.
Well, and the more important thing is that if they are in line, they're going to be. So this is one thing that is different with the movement. So say this guy is in line, right, and he's going to assault. He's got 7 movement points, but every hex he moves into is going to cost him 2 points, right? It costs an extra point. So he could only go, that's going to be 2, 4, 6. And so therefore he can only launch the attack from 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes away. So he can't really come in and get the benefit from being far away when he launches the assault. And as a result, then kind of, if you are in line coming forward to do an assault, then generally speaking, you're starting closer, because there's no way you have enough movement points to make it to your destination. And so therefore you have to start closer.
I take back that bit about line. The distance that you're describing is correct. The line modifier actually doesn't affect the French. It's for British or in column. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Yep. So if you are in line and you are going to come forward to do the assault, generally speaking, you're going to be starting closer than you necessarily would if you were in column instead. So it just depends on what you want to do. Obviously, you're going to have better fire defense in column. You're going to be able to fire better you're going to have better fire defense in line, and you're going to be able to fire better in line. But it's not, you just are there's a better chance that you're going to have more negative modifiers when you come up on your opponent. So just keep that in mind.
And you also, if you do want to, like if you're in line and want to charge, you want to do your formation change before you declare your charge, because then there's also a chance, I believe a disorder chance when you change formation if you're charging.
You mean you're assaulting?
You would
Yeah.
you would change to column first, then declare the
Right.
assault.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You can't, once you declare the assault, you can't change formation. So you would do that before you declare your assault. So, all right. Do we want to try to go through an example here?
Oh, well, yeah, we can, because we can kind of go through because it is lots of steps.
Yeah. Why don't we do
all
this one here first?
All right, so the roll to close would be first, and so let's say it's 0 modifier for that. It's a 1-on-1, and let's see, that's probably up a slope, isn't it?
It is up a slope, but yeah, this.
I think
Yes,
there's
you're going to have a
modifier for
-3. Yeah, because they're on higher ground.
that. Right.
So altogether,
All
it's a -3 from the looks of it.
So, and I'm sure he failed, so he would be disordered.
Yep.
Oh, he just failed.
All right. So then the Russian is going to roll to stand. The odds are I think there's what, 4 infantry here to 5 infantry. Oh, actually, no, it's just 1-to-1, right? Because we're looking at hexes. So there's no modifier on the odds assault morale check modifier. The defender's on higher ground, so that's going to be worth +3. And is there anything else? Nope, that's all I can see. So then they would roll with a +3, and they're going to pass. So they're going to have their full fire value and the opportunity for a shift. So now we do our fire combat.
You do your 1 die for the shift at the same time.
Here we go. And we roll the 6.
Oh, you get a +2.
Yeah, there's going to be 2 odd shift in our favor. So now you would do, so you get to fire, but you're just at half your printed value, correct?
I don't think, I think.
Yeah, half the printed value.
Yeah.
Half the printed value.
Yeah, so you still get to shoot, and I get to shoot. So I'm going to be 16 doubled. I'm going to be 32 to 6. So I'm going to be 5-1. You are at, I don't know what, 4 to
whatever you
4 to
are.
9. So a 55 at 1 to 2 is probably not enough.
I've actually stood on the board, battlefield exactly where this melee is happening. And that's about what it looks like when you're standing there.
All right, so I'll fire at you with a 5-1, and I rolled a 24 at 5-1. So that's going to be just a single hit, right? So you'd mark that, and so then now we take a look at the melee odds.
Right.
So I've got 14, and you've got basically 3/4 of whatever your value is.
Come on.
That's what you call foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So
it's 11, 3,
so let's say it's worth 3, so you're at, we'll say 8, and then halved, you're at 4. So it's 4 to 14. and then you've got an odd shift that's down 2 more. So you're at 1 to 3. And what happens if you're, can you
He
go
has a
more than
minus
1 to
six
3?
for a
minus 6 for
casualty.
the
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you're going to have a -6 for the hit you took.
Yep.
And then another -6 for the odds being below 1 to 3.
I don't think so. It's
Okay.
just 1 to 3 minus 6.
Okay. I know that in Premiere that's something that they've got. So, okay. So then it's a 1 to 3 with a -6. So 41. It's going to become a 31.
31.
So
Attacker
AR,
routes.
attacker routes.
Historically, I think it took the French 5 or even 10 assaults to take the flèches. But it's interesting that in game terms, the flèches here, they're actually usually almost untenable because the French roll up their artillery like they just did to the left with the 12 pounders there. And after about an hour, there's not much left of the defenders to try to stand against that.
Yeah.
Now, if we had rolled higher and it was just, if I'd rolled in the 50s or 60s there and we got that blank area, then what would happen is it would go into another round.
Yep. So let's imagine that's what happened.
And reserve. So the round 2 would start, and then there would be any retreat before assault, which there wouldn't be. Then you do another roll to close and a roll to stand. All units still involved in the assault, including committed. First you then would commit. You can commit some reserves, and there's a whole rules for what you can commit. But basically, you can, bring up like a reserve unit to join the assault. I think they can only go 2 hexes, and it has to be, there's a couple little things. So
Right.
Okay.
So let's say, for example, that that happened. So then we just make a morale check, and obviously we don't have the roll. Do we still have the roll to close modifier
Yep.
that we're dealing with?
all units still involved in assault, including committed reserve, now roll to close and roll to stand again as 3, except in the second round, defender checks first.
Okay. All right. So
So
here we would roll a 23 plus 3 because we're on the high ground.
Good unit, so
Yeah,
no
15. So
problem.
he's going to pass anyway. Okay.
If all defending units fail, blah, 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 no, so still roll to, but they do not disorder if they fail. The dice roll simply becomes a check to see if the units delivered effective fire. Offensive, defensive, okay, so then I would roll to close. I'm not sure how I'll have to go into, they have a pretty good detail section on the,
Right. It's on
reserve.
page 31 where they
Okay.
talk about round 2.
I'm not sure what the modifiers are at that point for my roll to close, but I probably failed again, whatever. Or actually, I think I have to do for both. Is it, Brennan, is it for the whole melee or is it just for the?
I think it's for each unit, each stack separately.
Yeah.
Right. So it's so here the roll to close and roll to stand. All units still
think the
involved in the
defender would check.
assault, including committed reserves, now roll to close and roll to stand again as in 3A above. And so 3A was the round 1 roll to close. So that's not any
So
different.
in this case, the defender would check first. And in
Yeah.
this case, now there's 2 hexes attacking because
Right.
the new battalion came up. So there would be a bit of a down modifier for being attacked from 2 hexes.
Okay, because it's a 2 to 1 coming in from 2 hexes.
Yep.
All right, and so then the if all defending units fail their roll to stand, assault, they must still roll to close. Roll to stand. Assaulting units must still roll to close, but they do not disorder if they fail. So if the defending units fail their roll to stand, the assaulting units still roll to close, but they don't disorder if they fail. The
Right,
dice roll simply becomes a check to see if the unit delivered effective fire.
right.
Yeah.
So you use the
Like,
original.
I've been playing.
Oh, go ahead.
I've
You
been
broke
playing
up there.
Bataille in general for 35 years or so. And I've only played Regs 30 lately in the last year-ish. Maybe I've played 10 games in Regs 30. I've never, ever seen a reserve commitment melee even arise. Like, usually the defender or the attacker are out of there long before you get to that point. But it does happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you would do this, and then we would do the combat and see what the result is.
Yeah, you do the offensive and defensive fire again, and then you would determine the new melee odds and resolve it. If reserves were not committed by either, use the firefight. Okay. What goes to the second round and reserves were not committed, you use the firefight column.
Oh, okay, that's where that comes in. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So say you didn't put the reserve in, now we're over on that other chart, and looking at it, the firefight chart is kind of, I mean, on the attacker side, it's about as good as the 1-to-1 chart, and it's actually better as the attacker being on the firefight chart, because there's a few less opportunities for you to fail.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you are at 1-to-1 odds or worse, the firefight is the way to go, unless you've got a bunch of reserves you can throw in and do something.
So, yeah.
The whole sequence is quite involved and multi-roundish. It's all interesting. It actually feels pretty authentic if you read your Napoleonic history and you read about the up close column attacks against defending lines with bayonets, and then it devolving into a firefight. Like, it all really matches what one reads about history. Is it necessary to go through all this machinery to get to some combat result? Hard to know. The third edition, fifth edition just has one simple attack, and that's the result. Is one going to be that much different than the other at the end of the day?
Well,
No.
no, but fifth edition has this new, I guess, if you get the blank result in infantry combat, then they all take a hit, and then then they make morale checks again, and then you recalculate the odds and you fight again. And so when we were playing, David and I were playing there at Dresden, with fifth edition there at Gettysburg, we had there were a couple of times that we're up against these big Austrian battalions, and the odds are pretty terrible, and he just kept rolling blank results. And I just kept losing more and more and more, and it was like this horribly bloody thing where I think we must have gone for 4 or 5 rounds until finally, my unit was depleted beyond 50% losses, and they broke and ran away, kind of a thing. But yeah, so you can, with fifth edition, they do have a mechanism now where it can go grind on and on and on, and you usually get some kind of result eventually. But here, I think you can only have the 2 rounds and then you're done, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can only have a. I'm not sure what happens. That's why I'm looking for to see what happens at the end of the second round.
The Russian players take a shot of vodka, and the French players take a shot of cognac.
There's no round 3. So what, do they just stay in place then if they get another blank result? blank, no result. Proceed to step 8. Step 8 is clean up. Remove assault and remaining. Roll to close distance markers. You're done. Okay, so they just stay in place then. If you get a blank result for the second round.
Yeah.
Same place, right in front of the cannons in the flesh. Next artillery segment.
Yeah, that's what we call less than optimal.
Yes, that's a good place to be.
Basically, they just hose you off with a readout there. It's a big damp spot.
But
The
that's
bodies will make good cover in the future.
Right. So
I think historically, bodies are like 4 or 5 deep there, all across that ridge.
yeah,
You go see it sometime.
yeah.
uh,
Now, so usually what you want to do is if you can get the defender to disorder, then if you get a DD result and they're already disordered, they're going to rout away. So generally speaking, you don't want, you either want to wear them down so that there's not that many increments there, or you, as a result of fire combat, they failed a fire morale check and they're disordered and they haven't recovered, then that's when they're vulnerable and you can come up and hit them. But yeah, when we were messing around with this before Gettysburg, Jim and I were just trying some stuff, and it's just like, okay, out of 5 assaults that using Premier rules or 5th edition rules probably would have resulted in 3 attacker victories and 2 mixed results or 2 attacker failed kind of things. It was worse. The attackers lost, I think, 4 and only won 1. And that's because in those other rule systems, the defender makes their morale check first. If they fail their pre-melee morale check, they run away, and the attacker doesn't have to make a morale check. And they automatically advance. And so everything's hunky-dory. Well, with this one, as you see, you're making your morale check. If you fail, now you're attacking disordered, so your fire value's halved, your melee value's halved, and then here's the other thing. All right, say this was successful and this guy bugs out. Well, now you advance in and you are disordered. And because you're adjacent to enemy, during the recovery phase that happens at the end of the turn after all the other melees are done, he can't roll to recover because he's adjacent to enemy. So you end up having then these strings of units along the combat line that are disordered, and they can't really undisorder until somebody breaks somewhere. So you feed some more stuff in, or you, that might be where you have the guy who's disordered does an assault adjacent because he's got the -12. He'll fail and then he'll get away. That might be one reason why you'd make an attack adjacent to get your guy out of a bad spot, I guess. But that's kind of what I see. And I can remember playing Lutzen. Was it Lutzen? Yeah, I think it was Lutzen. Well, they had it was Regs 23 or Regs 22 or whatever it was at the time. And then we had all these guys that were all just disordered sitting next to each other. It was very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, there's a real incentive to, as David said, to soften up the positions by firepower before you actually launch the assault.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the assaults against prepared units never work. Really.
Yeah. Robert, did that sort of educate you somewhat on what's going on?
Yes.
Okay, because we've been at this now for about 2.5 hours, and I know it's late out on the East Coast.
A little bit, relatively.
So
yeah, I'll review the rules some more too, and
yeah, what you might want to do is there on the labataille.us site, there is I'm pretty sure that there's a flow chart. Somewhere there's a flow chart for the melee stuff. And so I've used that. It's for Marie Louise, but it's the same. I don't think there's any major difference.
Yeah, there's I don't think Marie Louise had the second round.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as understanding, okay, do this. If this happens, then you go here. If this happens, so it'll cover everything in the first round, as far as the flow chart goes. So you might want to find that. I'll see if I can find it and email you a copy.
Okay.
But that's
it's on
kinda
there.
handy.
Yeah, and if you go through the 16.1, you'll see it's very descriptive, and then for each step in there, it also references then like, okay, round one, roll to close. It says 16.4, roll to stand 16.5. So if you just follow this, the text here, and then if you want to get more detailed information about, what's in the roll to close, you go to 16.4, and then you come back to here and just keep going down the list, and it's very, very complete and very easy to follow.
Okay.
Right. So it is unlike the Premier rules where trying to find anything is a challenge. It's like, trying to look up on a scroll Tacitus's comments about, what was going on at, at some German tribe somewhere. In this particular case, everything is very well done. And then the other thing is that there is a pretty good, as I recall, there's a example of play in the back.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can kind of go through that example of play, and it'll kind of walk you through infantry stuff. And then I think it also has an example for, I thought it had an example for a cavalry charge thing as well.
Yep.
Yeah. So that might be worthwhile to kind of take a poke at as well.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at that too.
Yeah. But I mean, the key things are that, the cavalry's got to have a maneuver unit to charge. The whole process for assaults is very much tilted in the favor of the defender. And as a result, you really have to make sure that you've prepared and softened up the defender before you go in. And so those, and then the other thing is that the order of the chits when they come up is going to dictate what happens where and when. And so that's, the other big variable where things can get a lot of friction, where you're really hoping that this chit got pulled first before this other chit got pulled, and that didn't happen. And then what do you do? Do you carry on with your plan? Do you wait and try it again next turn? What do you do? And so I think after a while you'll start to kind of get the feel for it. And it'll be the same. I mean, I've only played Regs there at Gettysburg, and before that it was a decade ago. So you and I are relatively new to it. I think Mitch has got a fair amount of experience. David, you've played it off and on here for the last couple of months. Rick, you've been playing it somewhat, or
No.
no?
Well, Rick
Okay,
did it at Gettysburg.
at Gettysburg.
Yeah,
So
just at Gettysburg.
about as much as me then in that regard.
I've run a bunch of simulated cavalry charges, about 100 different variations. But I'm kidding.
Okay, so we will probably be deferring to Brendan
Yes.
for answers on stuff, and then just cross-indexing things in the rule book. So cool. Any other questions before we kind of wrap things up here?
No, I mean, I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Okay, well, cool. So then next week we should be set to play. Rick, the thing that you sent out was good. It looks like everything's in the right spot. Obviously, people probably want to make some adjustments. So we'll have to try to figure out how to do that. Either do that on Monday when we get together, where everyone then just kind of makes little adjustments to where their units are, or what formation they want them in, etc. But I think that the module that you sent is the one that I'm using here, and everything's more or less in the right place, from what I could tell from the setup chart.
Yeah, I mean, that's
They're-
fine, but
Both
Go
of the
ahead.
positions, but they're actually not like tactically very effectively set up. They're sort of
No,
approximately in the zone, but you wouldn't want to actually fight from where they're.
no, they're all just kind of plunked down in big, huge lumps. So they are where they need to be. But then so then how do you suggest we deal
what
with?
do you think you guys can get your setup adjusted by Friday? And then you can send it to us, and then we could figure out how to get stuff adjusted on our end by Monday, maybe.
Sure. I mean,
My-
Brennan and I probably need to chat a little bit, but I don't know. What's your thinking, Brennan?
Eric, if you and I and Mark got together someday this week, we could do our setup kind of thing. Would that be useful?
Yeah, that would be fine. I've got some time tomorrow evening if you want to do it. Might be
Yeah,
able
I could do tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. I will send Mark a note and see what his status is, and then we can see what we can get set up. So let's plan on it. What time would be good for you tomorrow?
I can do anything from 8 p.m. Eastern, which is 5 p.m. your time onward. We could do 10 p.m. Eastern like this one. Come on.
Okay. Yeah, let's.
Yeah, that works for me.
I'm sure, Mr. Spy. Yeah, let's do that, and then you and I will be. I don't know that it'll take us a lot of time to do it, but we should be fairly expeditious. So yeah, I'll see you tomorrow then at 10 your time, 7 my time.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then just drop it in here in the chat or wherever, or send it to Dave, and then whenever you guys are done, and then we can try to.
Yeah, when if
set
we
up.
have it done, we'll save it, and then I'll just email it to everybody.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you
All
for your
right.
time, and this all worked
Yeah.
out.